Okay. So fundraising is really what makes your mission possible. It is the backbone of your organization. Every single person in this room is capable of building this skill set, but it comes out in different ways. And there's a lot of different types of fundraising, different kind of ways that we can bring money into an organization to help fulfill a mission. So if we could, everybody, this is where you start to share. Either take yourself off mute. Again, this is a conversation, not just a presentation. So I really want to interact with all of you in the room today. So if you're comfortable, please take yourself off mute and share some different types of fundraising that you're familiar with or that you know of.
Okay, if no one else wants to go first. So I'm familiar with grants, so asking for grants from different entities, corporate entities. Also raising funds online, so having different online campaigns. Also, like Miriam mentioned earlier, stopping people in malls. I've been part of a few of those initiatives, and also just asking for individual donations from people.
Great, those are all really good examples. So you hit a few of them on the head. Corporate funding, institutional and government funding through grants, like you said, obviously crowdfunding, online giving, individual giving. Is there any other types of fundraising we can think of before I reveal the next slide and give it all away? Lottie?
I think I'm aware of auction events where people just go and auction different types of things to raise money. So yes, that's one that I'm aware about, yes. I haven't attended any, but I'm aware of it.
Definitely. Great. I see a couple ideas in the chat as well. So we will move on to reveal some of the different types of fundraising. So we already mentioned a few of these, but I'm just going to run through them. We've got monthly giving, major giving. This is where people usually give sort of a large chunk of money, sort of your top donors. Legacy giving, which is when people can leave gifts in their will. Foundation grants, government and institutional grant funding we talked about. Third-party fundraising, which includes peer-to-peer, auctions, event fundraising, all of that. A corporate sponsorship, which is another type. And online giving, which has been a large focus this past year through COVID, with a lot of fundraising initiatives shifted towards online. So these are just some different types, and there's lots of differences in how we do this type of fundraising, but there's also similarities, which really make up the success for fundraising in total. And so in order to look at those similarities, we're going to focus on sort of the foundation of fundraising. And the foundation of fundraising is really just based on three things. It's based on storytelling around the mission. It's based on relationship building, which is a really important part. And of course, it's based on asking for funds, which is a big part of it. So that's what they all have in common. Sorry if I'm not going with the flow of the slides because they're new to me. But those are sort of what these all have in common. Storytelling goes back to the relationship building, and then finally down to asking for the funds. There's the three steps right there. And today we're going to be exploring how these three steps work together and sort of breaking it down step by step. So we are going to start with step one, which is storytelling around your mission. And before we move forward, we have to identify what our mission is. So for Girls 20, the mission is to advance the full participation of young women leaders in decision-making spaces to change the status quo. But I want you all to think about your mission, whether that's the mission for your social impact initiative or the mission of an organization you work for, or something that is going to motivate you to fundraise today. I want you to share your mission in the chat. If you could do so, that would be great. You could also take yourself off mute and share that way if you'd like. So just take a few minutes to think about it, put it into words and share it with the group. And Miriam, you can always chime in along the way if I haven't covered anything.
I'm just thinking about, basically today we're going to walk you through, like, you're going to be writing out almost like a pitch. So this is the foundational piece of everything we're going to do after right now. So if you're not sure, put up your hand. If you're not sure what your mission should be, let's talk it out now. Because if you don't have this piece, everything that comes after right now is going to be a bit more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see some being dropped into the chat right now. Great and powerful missions. Thank you for sharing.
Can you read them out, Ellie?
Yeah, definitely. So Kitu said, our mission is to level the playing field in education for underprivileged high school students in South Africa. And Amna said, to help women get digital and financial literacy so they can scale up their businesses and also stay wary about bad investment deals. Awesome, awesome programs. So yep, take your time. There's no rush. Just continue to think through and put your mission into words. We said the mission of my initiative is to equip women in the community with knowledge in business and finance and e-commerce. That's great.
So we are going to wait to get one from everyone in the chat, or at least share it verbally.
Yes, because as Miriam said, these are kind of blocks we're putting together. So we want the first step all done.
Any questions about this?
Okay, from Wadi, to reignite the hopes of hurting women and children towards access to quality education, equality and justice, empowerment, and sustainable partnerships for welfare.
Amazing.
Yeah. From Sophia, the mission of my initiative is to raise confidence of young women and promote healthy relationship models in society to combat domestic violence. Very powerful. And from Changyun, my mission is to make Korea more accepting and respectful towards refugees.
Amazing.
From Sakura, to educate and provide opportunities for all women in programming.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we missing? Diana? I think we got everybody else, right? Oh no, Diana. Oh, there she is.
And I don't know if Bernadita is on or if she's dropped out.
I think she's here.
She's joined twice, so I think she's trying.
Yeah, she joined from her phone. That's why.
Okay. Diana, to help female college students obtain confidence and break gender stereotypes.
Awesome. Okay, I'll message Bernardita separately, and Ali, you can just move on, okay?
Okay, wonderful. So as Miriam said, this is sort of the first piece to the puzzle we're going to be putting together as a group today. So now that we have our mission and we know what our mission is and what the cause is that we care about, we're going to start storytelling around our mission. And so in order to do that, we're going to be using a structure for the anatomy of a good story. The structure was actually introduced by Pixar, and this is how they put their stories together. So it's kind of cool, but this is how the structure goes. So it starts with once upon a time there was, every day, one day, because of that, and because of that, and because of that, until finally something happens. And to break that down into a little bit more detail, the once upon a time section is where we start to introduce a character and a setting. The everyday section is how we describe how things are every day for this person at the time in the beginning. So this is where it's happening. Once upon a time there was, and then you tell the story, the setting and the character. Every day, this is what this person goes through. This is what the setting looks like for them. Until one day, something happens, something changes for this character, for them to do something or change something, or go back to the way things were, or create a new normal. And because of that one day, certain things start to happen in response. So we fill those because of that in. There could be kind of multiple of those until finally, and because of that are really sort of the steps that they're going to be taking to achieve a goal, or to reach the finish line. And then until finally she or they achieve their goal at the end. So I'm going to use an example to fill this in, but the point of telling the story is really to connect with the person that you're talking to about your mission and to make them feel something. And so we're going to tell a story about a young woman and how the story relates to Girls 20's mission. So again, our mission is to advance the full participation of young women leaders in decision-making spaces to change the status quo. And a story that I could tell to really connect back to that mission is this one. So using this structure, once upon a time, there was a young woman named Sarah. She was born and raised in the Middle East. She was independent and bold and very brave. Her parents were very supportive, which allowed her to become the woman that she is today at home. Every day, she struggled to be accepted by the rest of the world outside of her home and outside of her family. Her professors in university said that she was too much, just too outspoken, too bold, too much overall. Every day she struggled to find her place in society and had a hard time seeing what her future could really look like. One day, she found this thing online called Girls 20 and the Girls 20 Summit. And on this one day, she decided that she'd apply. The odds were not in her favor, but she was going to pour herself into her application and go for it. Because of that one decision to apply, she got accepted. Because she got accepted, she built her first truly strong and supportive community of young women around the world who wanted to see her grow. Because of this, she started looking in the mirror. She could see her own self-worth. She started to feel empowered, started to believe that her dreams could come true in a different way. She also started hearing that many other women have been experiencing some of the same things that she's been through, regardless of where they've lived around the world. And so she started taking baby steps, little by little, then massive steps, big leaps towards the woman that she strongly believed that she could eventually become. Until finally, 5 years later, after her involvement with the summit, she runs a successful organization for young women in her country to help them build communities of champions that changed everything for her. She's not only successful in her career, but she's also fulfilled. She's making an incredibly massive impact, which we know is truly fulfilling. So that's the story of Sarah. Can we see how I easily sort of plugged in the story to this anatomy, this structure? And I hope that the story that I told using this structure did tie back into our mission, and that you could see the clear connection there. Yes, Miriam.
So what I hope that this exercise is going to do for us today is really give you a way to talk about the impact that you're making. Instead of being like, you know, if I met someone and said like, till this day, I don't share the mission of Girls 20 when someone's like, oh, where do you work? I'm like, Girls 20. And then they're like, what do they do? I don't share the mission. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't really fully encompass to somebody on the outside what it is that we do. But when you can share a story, that's when you can really link them. You know, you hear like the starting point and, you know, when excuse me, when young women join, like, you know, what is their situation? And then like 5 years later, they have these awesome social impact initiatives and they're changing the, you know, making big changes in their community and that kind of thing. So really painting the picture. So I'm hoping that at the end of this section of the workshop is just to be able to see the difference between sharing just your mission and then sharing the story around your mission and how that really changes like how it feels to the other person.
This goes back to Miriam's psychology degree, because it's all about how people feel and making people feel connected to the mission. So hopefully that example story showed a way that this story that we've told about this young woman could make the listener feel something and then really start to believe in the mission behind the work that we're doing. So we are going to take some time to apply this. And we are going to basically take the missions that you've dropped in the chat. And thank you, Renata, for joining us and for dropping your mission in there. And we're going to take the missions that we've put in the chat and we're going to actually start to build our own story using this structure. I'm going to scroll up so that the structure is there in front of you. But take a few minutes and start to write this down. Miriam, did we want to be sharing our stories quite yet in the chat, or should we just write these down individually on our own for a bit?
Yeah, I think we can, what we'll do is we'll write them down. You can take a decent chunk of time, like 5 to 7 minutes-ish, to write down your story. And I'm going to actually write down what each of these prompts means, like in more detail in the chat. To support you. And then what we'll do after that is actually go into breakout sessions and you can verbally share your story with somebody else in the group. Okay, so here it is.
Great, so take some time and just write it down.
Whoops, sorry, 1 second.
Sorry, I have a question. I'm not sure if I should maybe just reserve it for later or if I can just ask it now.
Go for it.
Okay, just in relation to what Miriam said earlier about how when someone asks her what she doesn't share the mission, she shares the story. But I'm just thinking now in the context of elevator pitches or presentations where you have like a limited time constraint, you know, how do you weave in the story in 2 minutes while getting straight to the point, you know what I mean? So just being straightforward about like what you're asking for, like what you need, or you know, without
Definitely. Do you want to take this, Miriam, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. I think that there is a lot to say about the context that you're in. So, you know, certain times people really do want your mission. I would say that's very rare. And you can actually become really good at sharing a story within 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. It takes tons of practice. And what you'll end up doing with your practice, it's like time yourself, literally put it on your watch or whatever, your phone, and time yourself and see how fast you can do it. Because what you'll end up doing is cutting out anything that's not necessary in your story and keeping just the key points that really paint the picture. And I think we can do that extremely, extremely quickly and effectively with practice. And I think that still goes way further than sharing just the mission, unless your mission is like crystal clear and it's obvious, but still it doesn't have the emotion attached to it, right? And emotion is what really motivates someone to act. It's not logic. Logic will never convince anybody to give you money. It's always the feelings, you know? So I think, like, to answer your question, I think there's two sides of it, that we do need to understand the context of where we are, who we're talking to. But at the same time, I think there's an effective way to be able to do it, which takes practice. And I think when you do this, you'll be able to see what I mean, like when you actually put your story into this framework. So give it a shot, and then let's touch base again about the same question when you're done.
And even with the story I just shared, there would be a way to make that a bit more concise, really just sort of one line for each of these points of the anatomy. Instead of elaborating on who Sarah was and how she felt, you know, you could just tell the story of a young girl who was, you know, who wanted to grow a community of young women and did that through the Girls 20 Summit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So take some time to write your stories down. Maybe just let us know in the chat once you've finished, but we'll give you about 5 minutes or so to do that.
Hi, Ellie. So it's kind of all over the place, and I've tried to follow the anatomy as much as possible. I wanted to be concise because I understand that whenever you're asking for funds, you have to be very concise, very to the point, and it has to be like an elevator pitch. So, if you can please take a look at it and give me your feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Let me just give me a second to read through it.
Sure.
I would say for this part of the exercise, I wouldn't worry about making it like short or succinct at this point. You can worry about like bringing it down later. For now, really flesh out the details and paint the picture. But Amna will give you some feedback for sure.
So I like your story a lot. You followed the structure really well. You're almost telling the story of how you came about putting your program or your project together, rather than telling the story of someone who's maybe been through the project or been through the program. And that was a question that came up the last time Miriam ran this workshop is, well, what do I do if nobody's completed the program or I don't have a strong example of a success story to tell? So I think you've done a great job with what you have. And I like that you followed the structure really well. But I think it's almost a little bit more powerful if you can use an example of how someone's life will have changed through the program that you're explaining, through the work that you're explaining that you're going to be doing. So even if you haven't had a young woman go through this financial literacy training and the digital literacy programs, you could use an example. Like Sarah isn't necessarily a real person, but we've talked through what Sarah's been through and what the Girls 20 Summit did for Sarah and how it changed her life. And you could almost put somebody in the shoes of a program participant and tell the story that way, because it's a little bit more of an emotional connection than just telling the story of how your work came to be or what your work is. Miriam, do you have a comment of feedback?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I would have said. I think you want to paint the picture of like the beneficiary or like the person who's really benefiting from what you're offering, because that's what's going to demonstrate the impact.
Okay, and I think now that you have pointed it out, now I'm realizing that what I have included, like in the until finally part, it's more like something idealistic that I hope to achieve, or it's not something concrete. And like investors and whoever is giving the money, they usually want something concrete. They want something that has been experienced, or that has been put into action as a pilot project first. So I think I could edit the last part a bit, and instead of um, going for the idealistic vision or the I'd say imaginary scenario, what I hope to achieve, I should be ending it on a note which is a more pragmatic account of someone who has actually benefited.
Yeah.
Or perhaps I can use my own example as well, because digital literacy is something that got me my family was in the midst of a financial crisis, but digital literacy helped me not only support my education but also my family with the expenses. So maybe I could quote that. I don't necessarily have the financial literacy um, like I don't have the financial literacy to run a business, but I do have digital literacy, so I can probably use my own example over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can frame it as in until finally at the end there, you know, I did get this digital literacy training and I have, you know, improved the situation for me and my family in this way because of all of the steps that I took to get there. That's really the key point, is tying back what you've achieved to what the purpose or the mission of all of the steps leading up to that really was.
So yeah, I can probably structure it around how this helped me, so I know it will help other women as well. So
Yeah,
exactly.
give me the funds for that.
definitely.
Exactly. And I think, Amna, you make a really good point about pitching to investors, because pitching to investors is not the same as pitching to a donor.
Yes.
They're very, very different. So I just wanted to flag that, because this training will give you like a fraction of your preparation to pitch investors. That's a completely different ballgame. They do want concrete evidence. They want the numbers. They want the proof, all of that kind of stuff. So it's a bit different. I do think this will play into it, but just wanted to put that out there too.
Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the workshop, when we ran through different types of funding, like even on a grant application, you're not necessarily always telling a story. Sometimes there are numbers you have to provide and concrete evidence and that type of thing. But the storytelling piece and the emotional grab is kind of the point that we're trying to drive home in today's workshop, because it's applicable to almost every type of fundraising.
Yeah, I kind of have an experience. I was working for this tech startup that develops augmented reality games for the people with special needs, like people who have autism or who have cerebral palsy or stuff like that. And this startup develops games for their education and therapy, and they mostly relied on government grants. So when we used to be pitching for the government grants, or perhaps any other private bodies grants, or any international grants, there was a certain mathematical and financial angle to it. Like we had to show how many people we had impacted, how much those people, what kind of metrics we were using to measure the improvement in, let's say, a child with cerebral palsy, like some improvements in their muscular movements or something like that. So I think I understand what the financial part of it. So when we're talking about the story, should we use numbers in the story as well, or we should just keep it emotionally appealing or something of that sort?
You're going to be telling the story of one person. So it's literally one human being's experience. So you don't want to use any numbers, because that will really take away from that one person's experience.
Yeah, the numbers can come after too. So if I'm telling the story of one girl named Sarah who finds the Girls 20 Summit, becomes inspired and empowered with this great community of global women, then afterwards, after I'm done telling the story and the person I'm speaking to, whether it's a corporate donor or an individual donor, is invested emotionally in what I'm talking about, then I can pull out the numbers. Oh, this many thousands of young women have been impacted by our program. And, you know, here's the concrete data that you're looking for. But again, in this story time, it's really about hooking someone in emotionally, getting them to care, listen and care about what you're doing and why it matters to your mission. We will get to asking for money towards the end of today's workshop. I just saw the question from Kitu there. So yes, stay tuned. We'll get to that. It is really focused on the storytelling for right now, but we will get to asking the difficult questions at the end, because what's the point of fundraising if you're not going to ask for funds? I think we'll move forward, Miriam, a little bit. Does anyone have any questions about this story piece before we move on to the next section? And if you do, feel free to drop them in the chat. Miriam's sort of monitoring there and can answer along the way. So we're going to move on to the next foundational piece. So the first foundational piece was storytelling as it relates to the mission. The second foundational piece was relationship building. And in order to build meaningful relationships, there's sort of two steps. And they're not in order, they kind of go together. So the first one is to care, and the second one is to listen. So it's important to know that fundraising isn't about talking, it's not about pitching, but it's really about listening. And to listen, you really have to care. You have to care about who you're speaking to. You have to care about making them care about your mission. So yes, you care about your own mission, but the mission only becomes possible when people start to donate, and they only really start to donate once they care about the work that you're doing. When you're able to focus on the person in front of you, you can start to understand what they want, why they're interested, and what they need. And it provides you with an opportunity to sort of get closer to them and to allow them to get closer to that, what they're really looking for. It also allows you to ask the right questions or answer their questions and learn more about who they are so that they can learn more about what you're doing. It also allows you to find a point of intersection or a point of commonality. So what do you and the person you're speaking to have in common? What does the work that you do and the person you're speaking to have in common? So it's not manipulative. We're not trying to win someone over. But what we're really trying to do is provide a win-win situation for both parties. Sometimes you don't know what somebody wants right away, and you sort of have to peel back some layers to get down to that. It could take months to figure this out, and you just really need to focus on yourself and your own. If you really only focus on yourself and your own needs, you won't get there. So you need to follow up with that person and stay connected with that person so that you both don't lose out on the opportunity. If you build the relationship, everybody will win in the long run. But you need to do this through listening. And it means not losing focus on what that other person as part of the conversation brings to the table and where they're at. You want to listen to understand and not just to hear what they're saying. So we're going to talk a little bit about active listening before we go on. And I'd love to invite you all to share what you think active listening means to you. So what is active listening? What does it look like, feel like, and sound like?
Maybe like showing your reaction. So just trying to maintain the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
I think active listening is something like, instead of just talking and sharing your experiences, you ask people about their experiences and what they're looking for. And I believe and a certain angle of it also includes, like, if the donor body or if the donor individual has some sort of criterion that I will be giving the money to an organization or an individual who's doing this, this, and this. And you actually understand the requirements and then craft your response according to it. I think that also counts in active listening.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Does anybody else have some ideas to add? I think we can think about what active listening looks like. So for me, active listening is eye contact, body language, nodding and showing that you're understanding what you're hearing and what that person is saying as well. And I think you made a good point. It's asking the right questions to better understand what the person in front of you is saying. And so when we look towards building this relationship, we don't only want the person hearing our story and our mission to be actively listening to us, but we also want to be actively listening to them. So often before you jump into the storytelling and to the pitch of what you're trying to, communicate with the person in front of you, you'll have some small talk. You'll talk about the weather, you'll talk about family and friends, something, general in the beginning of your conversation. And that's where you can sometimes pick up on those potential points of interest, common points of interest or points of intersection. So if that person mentions they have a daughter and we have programming for young women, that's a potential point of intersection. So that type of thing are little things you as the person providing the story and telling the story, you want to pick up on those things. And that comes through actively listening to who's in front of you before you just start speaking. So with that, we're going to put all of this into practice. So I just want to make sure that that's the next slide. Apply this. And we're going to be doing this in breakout rooms. So Miriam has organized some breakout rooms for you guys to split off into pairs and for you to practice actively listening to each other and telling your stories as it relates to your missions. So you'll have the opportunity to go into these breakout rooms, practice telling your stories using the story structure, and then relating it back into your mission and just having these conversations together, and really try to think about what you have in common, what those points of intersection are, and what you've gained from telling your story, but also listening to the person in front of you. And when you come back to the room, you can share with us, what the stories were, if they were impactful, if they made you feel something, because if they did, that means you were caring, you were listening, and the person telling the story did a really good job. Miriam, do you have anything to add before we break out?
Yeah, I just want to flag that later you're going to be matched with the same person. And the listening is really going to come in handy because later we're going to be tacking on the ask piece. And you'll really want to use that ask to speak to what you heard from that person earlier on. So learn as much as you can from the other person, because later you're going to make that ask specific to what you heard about them. So I'll just leave that there. And then the last thing I'll say is that one of the groups will have 3 people in it. So you'll just have to use your time wisely, and we'll give you warnings. Yes, it does sound tough, and it is tough, but you can do it. Okay, so we're sending you off, and we will bring you back in about 10 minutes or so, and we'll give you warnings. Ready? Have fun.
Bye.
We do.
Awesome. So how was that? We're going to do a little debrief quickly. So please take yourselves off mute and share. So what felt good? What felt awkward? What did you feel something from that other person's story, and what did you feel? So please start sharing a little bit about how your session went.
So I was in the breakout room with Wadi, and whenever you're with Wadi, you're always moved. So So I was really moved by Wadi's story, and with Luli, I think we have a lot in common, and our initiatives also kind of match. And we shared our stories, and Luli came up with a very good suggestion that all of the social impact initiatives that are focused on education, we might just make a group of our own, and we can connect later and discuss how we can implement it in our respective countries.
Awesome. That's so great.
That's awesome, because you can only find similarities if you're listening.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share some of what they've learned from their little breakout room?
I don't mind sharing. So I was paired with Hinata, and I think we were at a bit of an advantage because I've already come across the work that she does already. But it was nice to hear like how everything started, and then we were just giving each other tips at the end about like how we could possibly restructure the storytelling format, because I think we were a bit lost on that. So we were just giving each other pointers, and I mean, it was just really nice to see her after about 3 years, you know.
Yeah.
I know it hasn't been 3 years, but yeah, just after a while.
Awesome.
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, it was great. Just to add on that, I kind of, because my internet's so bad, I kind of missed it. So in the beginning, so I wasn't sure if we could like create a fictional story in the beginning to like do the storytelling, because with my project, it's like we have a website and Instagram. It's a lot more about raising awareness. So we don't have like the specific young woman that was formed by the program or something like that like we do at Grows 20. So I wasn't sure how to do that. So it was really helpful in terms of understanding how you can actually do that and like create a story it's not fictional on itself, because it happens a lot, right? But you have to take that personable side of it to make the story, I guess, resonate with a lot of people. So that was just a challenge to do, just to share, but I think it's gonna help in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even talk about a story of a young woman who sees your content and feels inspired, right? If it is about awareness raising and putting a message out there, that in itself is the journey of a person who's interacted with your work, and because of that until then, something happens to them. So yeah, that's a great example to share. Anybody else have some thoughts on how their session went?
Or even like questions, concerns, anything that felt wrong or awkward or anything that we can help resolve.
Yeah.
All good.
Everybody's a pro.
All right. Okay, cool.
Awesome. Okay, well then we're going to take this time. If anybody needs a little break, Miriam, is that right? We're going to move into a
so
3-5 minute break just to grab some coffee, water, tea, or have a bathroom break, whatever you need.
Would that be helpful? Yes. Okay, let's meet back then in 5 minutes.
Okay. Miriam, give me the thumbs up when you want me to start. Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed a quick little break. It was really wonderful hearing the debrief after your breakout rooms. It sounds like went really well, that people were pretty comfortable with the storytelling structure and came up with some good examples to draw from as it relates to their mission. And I hope that you practice step number 2, which was really caring and listening about the conversations that you were having and about what the other person in front of you was saying. Whether you were the one telling the story or hearing, it doesn't matter. You should be actively listening and caring the whole way through. So we've done the storytelling. We've built the relationship with the person that we're speaking to. And now comes the difficult but fun task of asking. Let me just reshare my slides here. Hopefully everyone can see. So we're getting to the last section, step 3 of the 3 foundational steps of fundraising, which is asking the question. Of course, we can't raise money without asking for it. So who here feels comfortable asking other people for money? Just show your hand. Not a lot of us. Maybe Miriam, because she's been doing it for a long time. She's great. Okay. So yeah, not everybody
stops feeling uncomfortable.
Pardon?
It never stops feeling uncomfortable.
That's true. That's true. So it's not the easiest thing to do. And no wonder why it's the most challenging part of fundraising, is because we're opening ourselves up to the risk of someone saying no. Rejection's never fun, but it is part of every fundraiser's life. And you get used to it the more that you do it. So why is it important to ask this difficult question, to ask for funds? Because not asking is a guarantee way that you won't get the money that you need to help support your program or your project. So the chances are significantly higher of you getting the funds over if you ask over not asking at all. And how many of you want to do good? How many of you want to put your mission into action? And how many of you care about that mission? Well, the only way we can really put it into action is to drive funds to help support bringing it to life. So we are going to go through some key aspects of making an ask, of asking the hard question. So these key aspects include highlighting the opportunity, also highlighting that point of intersection. So while you were practicing your storytelling and your active listening, you should be picking up on some of the things. I know the group that talked about education programming had quite a bit in common. So you should be picking up on those points of intersection and understanding what the true opportunity is. The opportunity is not for you to share your organization's purpose and your mission and your story, but it's really to understand the opportunity here, which is to create a partnership, to establish a relationship, and to eventually fund your programming. The next part is to be really clear and specific about what they get. And so that's really important as well. We want to make sure they understand what we're talking about and understand what the benefits are of supporting the program or what they might get out of that as well. And then the last part, oh yes, go on.
Sorry, to that point, I think that it's interesting to speak about what they get when you're asking for money, because generally the way we think about fundraising is that they give us something. So we're the ones that get, not them. And the best way to make this an opportunity for them is to position it in a way that they're gaining something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to think about, maybe you're not doing anything and maybe you're not giving them something. like tangible, but you have to really think about it from their perspective of like, what's going to be the reason that they give to you? Is it a feeling that they walk away with? Is it like their name on the website? Or is it, you know what I mean? Like, do they get to come to your event for free? Or, whatever it is that they get, really making it clear. So for us at Girls 20, we have different levels of asks. Like we'll have, at a certain amount, you get your brand name on like one of our sessions at like a public event type thing. So it'll be like X company's topic on, let's say, microaggressions or something. So being really clear about that. Whereas if we're pitching to like a major donor who's going to give us, let's say, 10K, maybe their offers are going to be different. Maybe we'll invite them to participate in Summit, right? So really thinking about like, what is the give on your side? Yes, you're asking for money, but like, what are you going to offer them back? And it has to be something that's really going to make them be like, yes, I want that.
And as Miriam said, if there's nothing tangible to give, there's no specific thank you plaque, or we can't put your name on our website, or we can't do something tangible, at least communicating the impact that they will have as a donor. You get to, change a young woman's life by helping support the Summit program that does this, this, and this. So if there is no tangible offering, at least communicating what they get out of, like you said, the feeling that they'll walk away from donating with is really important. I see a hand up, so feel free to unmute and ask.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, how would you ascertain what would be valuable on their side if you're not giving them anything tangible, like Miriam is mentioning? So if they're not really interested in a feeling, or maybe they are, like, how do you ascertain that? Do you ask them directly? Do you give them a couple of options? How do you navigate that?
So before you answer that, Miriam, I'd also like to add on to that question. I had a similar question. Like as a social impact initiative or as a startup, people don't really have much to offer. So if we are going to some big giant or some big corporate giant or any government body or whoever, and all we can offer is recognition and some sort of branding opportunity, co-branding opportunity. What does your experience say? Does that really matter for them? And especially if it's a women-centric issue, do brands really like to associate with the feminist causes? Because I am afraid that in societies like Pakistan, if I go to, let's say, Unilever or perhaps any other big corporate, maybe to one of the banks, and pitch them that, hey, this is my initiative. If you can fund me, I can put I can put your name on my collateral. I can use your collateral in our training workshops or whatever. So does that really matter for such organizations, or they're gonna just pass it off as something like just another startup or just another social impact initiative? What does your experience say about it?
Yeah, so I think the best way to find out what's valuable, to answer both of your questions, is to listen. And that's what comes in the second step. The thing is like I shouldn't say no two corporations are made the same, but there are differences. Like we have some corporate donors who don't care about having their logo on any of our stuff. We have other corporate donors who that's all they care about. They don't want any engagement opportunities with our programs or anything. The only way to find out what they want is by talking to them and really understanding. So you're not going to go pitch your program, if it's focused on women, to an organization or a company or an investor who doesn't care about women's issues. It will be your job before you pitch them anything to understand and make sure that they're aligned with your mission. So the alignment is number one, but in terms of like their engagement, in terms of the benefit to them, you'd really want to listen to what they say. What do they care about when you're talking to them? What are the things they're investing in right now, right? Where are they putting their money? What are they standing behind? That's going to give you
background research is necessary.
Definitely. And I think this is the main reason why you never want to walk into a situation and pitch right away. You know, you never want to meet somebody and pitch right away. And the reason is because you just don't have a chance to understand them yet. You don't understand them. You don't understand what they want, you know, what's beneficial, what's exciting to them, to really position your ask in a way where it's intriguing and exciting for them. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and that's, again, it kind of highlights the first point in the anatomy of a good ask is really just understanding what the opportunity is. The opportunity is not for you to get money from this person. It's for you to learn and listen, to really understand where the opportunity to partner is. And that's why we said, you know, in small talk, if someone mentions that they have a young daughter, that's a great point of intersection to say, well, my programming focuses on young women and a girl similar to your daughter. Let me tell you a story about her. And let me tell you, you know, and that's where that point of intersection comes from. If you're having a hard time finding it, doing that research ahead of time is already you taking steps to care and listen ahead of time, so that when you go into that conversation, you could say, actually, I did see that on your website, and you know, that's really interesting to me, and here's why. So to be able to do that research ahead of time is really important, and it's already showing the person you're speaking to that you care about their work and that you care about partnering with them.
Yeah, and another like interesting example is like, you know, we've been doing some research around our social enterprise lately, and the social enterprise will go into corporations and offer training for young women leaders within corporations. And something that we've heard really often when we're talking to people is that these are professional women now, like in their mid to later levels in their career, and they say things like, I wish this was available when I was younger, when I first started in corporate. So that is something that me as a fundraiser, I would hang on to. I would remember it, I would write it down, and I would remember to come back to it when I'm pitching or when I'm making an ask, because I know that it's something that they wish they had. I know it's something that they see as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I would position it in that way. Kitu, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry, my internet is lagging a bit. But I just had a follow-up question in regards to, you know, figuring out if your interests or your values align. If they do, right? Because I'm thinking more about along the lines of asking corporate entities for funds, if they're already working with organizations that do similar work, or if you have an interest in women or anything like that, but they're already doing some work.
She froze right at the important part of the question.
Okay, I'm sure she'll reconnect in a second.
Okay.
Oh, she dropped off.
Okay, maybe she can. Oh, Kitu, you're back. Could you try to ask the question again?
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. I did mention my internet is lagging. I was just asking, so if you do have a common interest, I'm thinking more along the lines of corporate entities. If they're already involved in like in a partnership or doing some work already with other organizations that might be doing similar work, or also are working with the specific demographic, do you still go ahead and approach them for funds as well, or do you just try a completely different company?
I think that's a good question. I think you should think about what sets your program or your project apart from the partnerships they already have on the go. And if there is a unique aspect to what you bring to the table and you'd like to approach them, I think that that's a great idea, because it shows that they're already interested. There's already that point of intersection in programming related to what you're bringing to the table. And all you have to do is really think about what sets your program apart, what's different from what they're already doing that they might like to get involved with.
Yeah, and even like, you know, I think it's to Allie's point, I think that's great. Like it really confirms their interest. So they're more likely to give. One thing you would want to keep in mind is that even if they're giving to somebody else now, first of all, that doesn't take away the opportunity for you. They could very well, like multiple corporations give across, you know, different organizations and different causes even. So that doesn't rule out the possibility. But coming back to the relationship building piece, you know, if you really focus on getting to know who's behind this work, who makes the decisions, build a relationship with them, tell them about your program, even if they can't give you money now, they will start learning about you. You stay in touch with them. You know, maybe the opportunity reopens like next year when they're considering their funding again, and really start building those relationships. It really is a long-term game. You know, we've really simplified this into 3 steps, but these 3 steps could take you weeks, months, possibly years, depending on who you're talking to, right? So yeah, really think about it in terms of investing in the relationship, and keeping your goal in mind at all times, but working towards it. And when you feel like, okay, this is the moment to make the ask, you know, they're reconsidering their budgeting, for example, and you know that because you've been in touch with them, then that would be a good time to put it forward. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
and
does.
as
Thank you.
Miriam said, this doesn't happen in 5-minute breakout sessions or 10-minute breakout sessions. This happens sometimes over the course of a long time. And so that second step, the relationship building piece, through listening and caring about what they're doing, that could be following them on Twitter and seeing what their company is up to, or following an individual donor on LinkedIn and seeing what their corporate interests are and what motivates them and what type of things they're sharing, and then drawing on those the next time you talk to them. That's the point of intersection. That's the opportunity. So always, like, it doesn't have to be in a conversation where you're listening and caring, but doing your research ahead of time and staying up to date and staying connected. Like wishing them happy holidays and dropping in and having those points of meaningful relationship building before you make the ask is important. Great. And then the last part of, oh, sorry, was there another question?
I have one last question.
Of course.
I think you both mentioned about the right time to make a good ask, but what is the right time to back off if from a funding opportunity? Like sometimes, you know, the other company might be asking a lot from you. So where do you draw the lines? And if you can please share something from your lived experiences when a donor or a donor who approached you, or perhaps a donor that you yourself approached, and they were ready to give the money, but they were demanding a lot from you in return. So where does one draw the line in such cases?
This is a really, really important question. And Miriam are smiling. We're both smiling because I think we have the same example in mind, but I'll let you answer this question if you can.
Excuse me. Yes, that's such a good question, Amna. And I think it is so important. Like, you know, I think as young women and women, period, it's like boundaries is such an important thing that we just always have to continue to practice. And I think that we'll always find that our boundaries are pushed, and it's our job to push back when they're being pushed. And, you know, so Ali's right. Like we were recently talking to a company who wanted to sponsor us, and their demands were just, I mean, they still are. They're just like so they're overbearing, quite honestly. You know, we have a lot of corporate donors who will be like, yeah, engage us in XYZ and here's the money. And then it's like super easy. Yes, they require work throughout the year, but not like every single day responding to emails, which is what this has been like. So literally, if I don't respond within 24 hours, I get a follow-up email over and over and over again, like no joke. So I created, you're gonna laugh, but I created a division of labor document that like literally separates like our role, your role, AKA you leave me alone when I'm working on my stuff. Thank you very much. And it's just like, you know, certain things, you know, and there was a point where I was like, is this worth it for us? Like, is this worth it to get this amount of money if this is what we're going to have to give back? And I came to the conclusion that it would be worth it if I draw like a very clear line in the sand and say, this is what we're willing to do. This is what we're not willing to do. Let me give you another example with this exact same person. They said, so our agreement hypothetically would go till the end of June. And they asked if they could have our logo on their website till September or October. And I was like, no. And so I'm like, if you sign another agreement with us from July 1st to September, October, then sure, we can discuss that. But no, we can't have that beyond the date of the agreement. So the challenging thing is that when you need the money, you're tempted to be like, okay, you know, but you always have to come. It's kind of like when you're applying for a job and they're like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but they're like, we don't believe in the 9 to 5. We believe in doing all that you can for your job. And I'm like, no. I know about work-life balance and I know that's not going to work for me. So if I hear that kind of talk, I like run, you know? And so it's kind of like that. Like you really have to understand what you're capable of, what you're willing to sacrifice on. You know, maybe I'm not willing to sacrifice on the logo on the website, but maybe you are. Maybe that's something that you're okay with giving up, you know? But I think that I'm a kind of like an emotionally guided person. And so I tune into like how I feel about things. And I always say like, you know, do I feel like this is the right thing to do? Like, will I be upset with myself later for doing this? Or is it like really truthfully, like not a big deal, you know? So I think just really kind of touching base with yourself, understanding that there are boundaries, like personally and professionally, when you're dealing with these relationships, and not being afraid to draw the line. You know, if you're uncomfortable, like definitely draw the line. You don't want to regret it later. You don't want it to backfire later, which I mean, they can. So
yeah, it's a really good question. And in the world of fundraising, it's hard to say no to a funding opportunity.
Yes, it is.
It's really hard because you want to bring those funds in to support the really important work that you're trying to drive home.
Yeah.
However, there's always other opportunities out there. And, you know, saying no to one company might actually show you why it's important to pitch a different way, or to set up, you know, the way that you're speaking with a company a different way, to establish those clear lines. This is what I have to offer. And that's really the second point of the good ask, is be very clear and specific as to what they get out of this partnership, and what you're willing to negotiate on and kind of waver on, and what are actually hard yeses or nos, in what you're willing to speak about. But yeah, that was a great example.
One more follow-up question. I'm really sorry I'm taking so long on
That's
this
okay.
one. Have you ever had some sort of experience that the relationship that you have with the funding body or the funding individual, that affected you or your judgment capability of where to draw the boundaries? Because some people can be really sweet, but you know that they're pushing you back, and you kind of compromise with, you know, even though it's not good for you, you're not okay with it, but you kind of compromise because they're being very sweet, or you have a very good work relationship with them. So in that case, does the personal relationship does it affect your judgment capability, and is it okay that you let your relationship with the funding body or the funding individuals let your judgment be clouded about where to draw the boundaries?
I think at the end of the day, you have to put your mission first. You have to put your organization and what you're actually trying to accomplish first. I'll use a very quick example because we have to move on to practicing this last section. But I used to support third-party fundraising, and sometimes a fundraiser would set up a 5K run or a bake sale or something to raise funds for the organization. And my boss would say, you know, if their goal to raise funds is under $500, so if it's a smaller goal, if it's a $10,000 goal, handhold, you know, provide them all the support they need, help design their page for them, really be there for them. But if it's $500 or less, it's not worth your time. And that can be tricky. And so you actually have to set those levels. And for me, if a really sweet person reaches out and say, oh, I really want to do this, but I don't know how to use this website and I need help with this, that, the other. And I look at how much time I'm spending on them, but it's only a small fundraising goal versus there's another partner who's trying to bring in $10,000 or $20,000. I need to be spending that time on them. So you have to kind of draw a line for yourself and focus on what you're actually trying to do. Is that amount really worth it? And if it's not, I need to be pouring that energy into supporting the partnerships that are actually going to have an impact on the mission of the work that I'm trying to accomplish. So just trying to tie it back to achieving the goals of not just yourself. Yes, you want to make every fundraiser happy and every partnership, successful, but is it going to really, really support the impact of your mission? Okay, so we're going to move on just to the final part, which is the invitation. And this is where you actually ask for the cash, ask for the money, and have an amount in mind that you think, is justified. And so we're going to move on to that. We're going to put this into practice. So we're going to be sending you to breakout rooms for another 10 minutes. Try to be as concise as you can. You've already told your story, but this time we want you to practice telling it, relating it back to the mission, and then following it with this ask. So based on what you've learned and based on what you've heard from the other person, thinking about what points of intersection you have, thinking about what this could provide them in terms of a partnership, and then making the hard ask at the end of your conversation. That's what you're going to practice in the next breakout room. Miriam, anything to add before we send people?
Yeah. So we're getting very close to the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of all of your time. We can definitely stay on for an extra few minutes to answer any questions at the end, but moving into these breakout rooms, I'm actually gonna have to shorten the breakout room duration to four minutes, so 2 minutes each for you, because I want you to just practice like getting it out and then come back and ask us questions afterwards for whatever doesn't feel right, so we can address those. And then the other thing I was going to say that kind of complicates the situation is that we've lost a couple people. So our groups are going to be a little bit different. So finding the point of intersection is going to be a little bit difficult if you're not with the same person anymore, but take a stab at it. And Ali, I've actually put you in a room with Kitu because that way we can still have 2 people.
Pairs. Okay, great.
All right. So here we go. See you in about 5 minutes. Are you finished?
Didn't you ask us to switch? We literally just wrapped it up.
Oh no, I mean like switch, like so that each of you have a chance to go.
Oh my gosh, I literally was like, I thought you were telling us to go back to the main group. So we were like, okay, like let's just speed through it. But I mean, you were...
That's funny. Did you both have a chance to go?
Yeah.
We did.
Oh, you did? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, while they're coming back, feel free to ask me any questions. How did it go?
It's super quick, but you managed to get through the main point. So I was just explaining that like I'd ask for a specific amount of money and then break it down in terms of like what it would be used for. So one of the things we do are scholarship activations. So I was explaining that the money would be used for Wi-Fi and for transport and food for the volunteers. So just very specific, so the investor is able to see exactly how their money is going to be used.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. And then what did you choose for the opportunity for them, or like what they're going to get?
Yeah, you see, that's the thing, because we were just rushing through this thing.
Right, okay.
Yeah, we didn't cover that part, but we just took different turns being the investor and being like the person who's pitching. So we didn't get to like what they would benefit from it. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe
something to take away. Yeah, think about it, and then if you have questions once you start putting some thought into it, feel free to reach out to me and Ali at any time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Also, like, since we're waiting for everyone, is there going to be maybe, because I was thinking when we started, we'd get through like proposals, like grant writing and things like that. So is this the only opportunity we're going to have for a fundraising workshop? Like, are you considering more in the future just to unpack like the other topics, or like is it just limited to this?
Honestly, like we haven't thought about what else could come up after this. We wanted like a foundational fundraising course, but
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear from you, like what you want to learn, what would be really useful, because I think, you know, we could take that away, take it back to the team and see what we can come up with together. So yeah, definitely send me any of your ideas, like anything you want to learn more about. I'll take it back to Bailey and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Will do.
Yeah. No problem. All right, so sorry that was so fast. It's
that
10
got cut off quickly.
a.m. here, so that means we're actually at the end. Like I said, Ali and I can definitely stay, but I know if any of you need to go, we respect that, and please feel free. Ali, I'll turn it over to you to kind of wrap us up.
Yeah, I mean, really just wanted to reiterate that through all the different types of fundraising, whether you're speaking with corporations or filling out a grant application or having a conversation with a potential major donor or an individual donor or even a third-party fundraiser who's going to do their own initiative for you to raise funds. I think it's really important that we always go back to these 3 points. So understanding our mission and telling stories that really draw on our mission. Being able to clearly identify sort of what the needs are, being able to tell that story by building that relationship. So focusing on what you two have in common, why this person would be interested in supporting your cause in the first place. And then of course, finally making the difficult ask at the end. And it actually isn't that difficult. If you've been listening and you've been caring the whole way through, then you should be able to draw on some of those points of intersection and make a very, you know, a meaningful ask to a person or to a company. I think, you know, all of these different types of fundraising they're all different, but they all have this in common. And so we just really wanted to put this foundation out there. There's no such thing as not being old enough or professional enough or connected enough to be a good fundraiser. What you really need to be is passionate about the work that you're raising funds for. And all of you in this room definitely are that. I could tell just from, you know, this brief interaction with all of you. So thank you so much for coming together and for sharing your missions and some of your stories with myself and with each other. And yeah, I think that's kind of it for me. So really enjoyed having all of you. And as Miriam said, we have a few minutes. So if anybody wants to stick around and ask questions or continue the conversation, feel free to do so. Awesome.
So this was very
Thank you so much.
This was very helpful, and I kind of figured it halfway along this session that my social impact initiative is also focused around financial literacy. So basically what we learned in this workshop, a tiny bit of that will also be applicable to the financial literacy workshops if I will be holding them. So I think this was a great exercise, and I think it helped me get a lot more streamlined if and when I will be asking for funds from a body, and this will be really helpful. So thank you.
Awesome.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, if nobody has any questions, then you are all free to go. But it was wonderful to see you all. Bernardita, you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't want to keep anything longer, but I'm going to take the advantage. Yes, I do have a question, because about fundraising for me is more important. I'm looking into the perspective of women working on an unpaid job.
Yeah.
As we all started and as we all do, beyond my project and beyond my social initiative. And I admire Girls 20 so much because of that, because they can make it work into the volunteer work, into the nonprofit work, to even pay women an important and a salary. So I was thinking, I I want to be able to do that. I don't want to work with volunteer women. I want to have the opportunity to give them a steady job as I need one as well. Now I'm facing the shock of and change of privilege. I did volunteer works for the past 11 years now, but that privilege changed this year. So now I have to work for the money. And I hate saying that because I already worked. I had a decade of a working spaces. So I was thinking or asking if I can get accessory over that, or how do you get to a fundraiser to pay our work?
That's a really good question. It's a good question. And it's like the nonprofit sector's biggest challenge is to pay, operational costs and salaries. So, excuse me, I think that there's a difference between, what we call restricted funds and unrestricted funds within an organization. And when you apply for like government funding, for example, here in Canada, at least, like we have to outline very specifically what we're going to use that money for. Sometimes they allow for salaries, sometimes they don't, but sometimes it's like literally strictly programs. So, they won't cover salaries, for example. Other types of fundraising, though, is completely unrestricted, which means you can use it on absolutely anything within your organization. And so I personally, there is a space and there's a time for restricted funding. We need it to cover our programs. But unrestricted funding is the best because you can use it on anything that you need. And that's where I think it's best to cover costs like salaries. And you would use exactly kind of what we've shown you today. You don't need to talk about like the details of what your money is going to cover. All people care about is the impact, right? However, there's a caveat, obviously. Like if you're applying for foundations or government funding or anything where it's like literally we want to support your program, like something like that, they definitely will want all the details. But inquire and see, because sometimes salaries no problem whatsoever to cover in them. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. You'll have to investigate. But like with unrestricted funding, if you're talking to a donor who's like willing to give you a certain amount of money, they don't need to know what the money is going to be spent on. If you're raising like small bits of money from a lot of different people, they also don't need to know where the money's going. All they care about is the impact. So it's all about kind of framing it in a way where it's all about the impact, because it's true, we can't have the impact that we want to have without a salaried individual who is committed to the work, right?
And you can explain that too. You can say, by growing my team, we will be growing our impact, which will allow us to change this many more lives through the work that we do. But I agree with Miriam, having sort of an open bucket where you can collect funds and spend them as need be, whether that's a new computer because your last one crashed and you need it to get your job done, or new stuff. Like sometimes what we have to spend on as nonprofits is not glamorous and it's not necessarily buying a ticket for a delegate to attend the summit, but it's helping us, with the operational costs of keeping our office up or keeping our staff employed. So I think that's a really good question. But I think what Miriam has said, always looping it back to the actual mission and the impact of that mission, and justifying why we need that additional support, why we want to grow our team. At the end of the day, it's to have a greater impact on girls globally, or whatever your initiative is set out to do.
And also, I feel like, some people are just as passionate about as you are about paying people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we are so serious about paying people at Girls 20 that like we're not willing to compromise on that at all. So it's a matter of, I think, again, kind of finding the alignment in values. Like if you can find people who really believe that too, they would be happy to support you in that way. Whether or not they can cover a full salary, that's a whole other question. But like if they can provide something towards a salary and that would make them really happy, then that's like a win for both, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was struggling with this because it's not easy to go from a volunteer to a paid job. And especially when you try to make a job out of a passion like this,
Yeah.
especially social causes. So
Yeah.
I was feeling a little bit bad and upset. So I wanted to talk about with Girls 20 because you already do it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
It is really challenging. Like, I don't want to understate that either. Like, I know what it's like to start something from complete scratch and then try to kind of bring in funding. It's challenging. It's not impossible, but it's definitely challenging. So, like, cut yourself some slack and be compassionate and nice to yourself in the process, because there will be a lot of no's. There will be a lot of walls and barriers that come up ahead of you, but keep searching. The solutions are out there, and the allies and the people who really want to support your cause are there. It's just a matter of finding them, building that relationship, and getting to the point where you're comfortable to be like, hey, how about that money?
And for the hundreds of no's that you get, it makes the one yes so sweet. So to be able to go out and face the rejection from funders who aren't willing to cover the salary of an additional staff member, or even undesignated, they don't want to give to your cause in general. It's demotivating, but that doesn't mean there isn't someone out there who's willing. And when you finally find them, it's such a big success. So stay motivated.